So this is my lesson plan video for the Rutgers Alternate Route Program. This lesson that I created is meant to be taught in person, but for the sake of everything being done remotely, I'll present the first few minutes of this lesson in a virtual setting. This lesson is focused on an introduction to French course. I put that it can be used at the high school level. It can also be used at the middle school level, but for this lesson, it will be 9th grade French at a typical introduction level. This lesson is focusing on descriptions and adjectives. So it's going to be a small introduction of all of the typical, necessary, and most commonly used forms of description and adjectives, but also how to use them properly based on whether they're masculine, feminine, singular, plural, and talking about how using it properly, strengthens the context of sentences, but used improperly could then change the meaning of a sentence. So with that, I will share my screen and begin the lesson. Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, class. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day today. Raise of hands, thumbs up if we're doing well. Yes? Anybody comme ci, comme ça? Middle? Okay. Anybody très mal? Give me a thumbs down if you're feeling mal. No one. Great. Okay, so today we have a very interesting lesson. We're going to talk about descriptions and adjectives that are used in French. And as you can see in this photo right here, we have a couple of examples already of the kinds of descriptions and adjectives we use regularly in our day-to-day life. So when I talk about adjectives and descriptions, that sounds pretty broad. So we're going to try to narrow it down to the descriptions and adjectives we use of ourselves. So how do we describe what we look like? Are we really tall or really short? Do we have brown hair? Do we have blonde hair? Do we wear glasses? What's the color of the clothing I might be wearing? We can even bring it as far as describing our ethnicity. Are we American? Are we ethnically identifying with a different country? For example, I identify as Albanian American. But before we get into all of that, the way that this lesson today is going to work is we're going to have two components. So I'm going to teach you the structure first of how to use these adjectives, because as we've already been going over in the past few lessons, adjectives in French are gendered, as in we use masculine and feminine, as well as plural, singular, masculine, feminine. And so it's really important when we talk about descriptions and adjectives in French, because the endings of these words will change based on whether or not it's feminine or masculine. And we'll get into that now. So we'll turn to the next slide. So these adjective structures. So let's say right here is the root word. We have this example right here, bon, petit, jeune, court, gentil, just to name a few. Now, why are they different here? Why do we have bon? And why do you hear me say bon? And then here we have bonne. You hear the n at the end, right? Well, that has to do with what we see here. So if it's feminine, we'll typically add an E. In some cases, you'll see the word ending in N, the word ending in L, you'll add an additional L or N. We'll go into that in another lesson. But for now, let's focus on the E endings. You also notice how we pronounce those endings once we add the feminine connotation to it. So if I'm going to describe myself as gentil, right? Gentil means kind. Now I identify as a woman. I have added my ending, LE. But if I'm going to say je suis, I'm not going to say je suis gentil, because that's going to lead someone to believe that I identify as a male. I'm going to say je suis gentille, til. Repeat that, til, good. And that's important because when I'm speaking it out loud, and let's say I'm speaking it to a random stranger who doesn't know who I am, the stranger's going to hear, oh, okay, she is kind. She being the key word. And that helps clarify our conversation. And it's also important when we write, because then we understand the context. We understand, okay, that they're describing potentially a woman in a description, especially if there's no name or they don't explicitly say that this person is a woman. So if you're saying, in this case, as a teacher, you'll say Ms.Ejona. But if we weren't even going to use my name, how are we going to know who I identify as. These adjectives help us do so. Now with masculine, we don't add those endings. Some endings they'll change. So you see these stars right here, those words are irregular adjectives and they have completely different changes. It's not just changing the root word, you're adding different letters, you're spelling it differently. The masculine version of new is nouveau, and the feminine version is nouvelle. And you see the commonality here between new versus old. And you see right here with the stars that with a masculine word starting with a vowel or H. So in this case, we have it here, and we also have it here. But before we get into that complication, because I know this is a lot of information, let's just keep sticking to what we have on this side. Now we understand how feminine and masculine singular works, correct? It's simple. You either add an E at the ending, you don't change the ending, or you have those regular adjectives. But now here we have the plural. Now with feminine, your ending is ES if it's plural. So not an ES. You don't, this is strictly for singular. So if we had petite and we wanted to describe two people, two women, right? We wanted to say they are petites. Elles sont petites would be spelled Petitess. Because if we don't know the women's names, we just know that there's elles sont. We already know that's going to be plural based on how we conjugated être, because the plural for they is sont. But we then know that it's also feminine plural if we say il or elle out loud. And so it's important in writing that you see the ES. And it also even changes for masculine. So instead of not having a change, the plural is just simply adding an S at the end. So it'd be the same thing, for example, grand. Ils sont grands. Now it's going to sound the same, whether it's masculine, plural, masculine, singular. And that's why it's important to listen for that être verb when it's specific to listening. But when you're writing it down, they are going to see that change. So jot this down. You also have it in the packet that was handed out to you the class before. But it's really important to memorize this because this will never change. This will only follow you throughout all of your time in learning French. So now that we have that, let's look at a couple of examples of adjectives. So again, we're focusing the types of descriptions and adjectives to ourselves, our physical features. So let's say hair, les cheveux. Fun fact about hair is that it's always plural because it's talking about the literal hair follicle. So unless you're bald and you have no hair, you have multiple strands of hair. So it's les cheveux. Now I didn't make all of the verbs, or excuse me, I didn't make all of the adjectives here plural because these adjectives could also be used to describe eye color, hair color, a variety of other things. But is it long? Long. Is it court? Is it short? Marron, brown, blanc, blonde, noir, dark, frisé, curly, words like that, right? You have additional descriptions in your packet as well. Your eyes. Now here's the thing, les yeux is plural, but if it's singular, and excuse me, I forgot to write this down, it's l'œil, and it's spelled O-I-E-L. Now, remember that because it's also important that if you ever have to use or talk about a specific eye, let's say some might have different eye colors, some might have a single eye, it's important to know that it is spelled entirely differently from the plural. But let's just use the plural for now. So we have les yeux. Are they blue, marron, vert? Vert means green, blue means blue. What about height? If we're talking about height, are you grand? Are you tall? Are you petite? Are you short? If you wanted to describe anything on your face, visage. Maybe you have a happy face, visage heureuse. Examples like that. If we want to get past our physical characteristics, the clothing that we wear, because clothing is a part of our everyday description. Clothing is vêtements. Are you wearing a t-shirt, for example? I'm wearing a t-shirt bleu. Jupe is a skirt. Maybe someone in the class here is wearing a red skirt. Un jupe rouge. une veste, a jacket, you know, examples like that. And again, there are other clothing descriptors in your packet that you can refer to. And ethnicity. So if we're going to say you're someone where we have an American ethnicity here, if it's masculine, je suis américain. Now you hear how I essentially put it all together without stopping. Je suis amé. Je suis a. Because the next word begins with a vowel, you essentially combine the pronunciation, which is why, again, we talk about pronunciation being very important, because you might, you know, mishear something or it might sound like everything is being blurred together. So if it's masculine, you'd say, je suis américain. Américain. We don't pronounce that ending, right? Now, my example, I want to say I, specifically Ms.Ejona, am American. Je suis américaine. Je suis américaine. You're the n at the end. So try now. Talk with your partner for a moment. Say, you know, your ethnicity or the color of your hair. Okay, just a quick example. Make sure you are pronouncing those endings based on the gender you identify with. Okay, let's continue. So here I've written an example of a descriptive paragraph of myself, just so everyone can see here visually and hear me pronounce it visually. But also for our activity today, if you haven't guessed at this point, we are going to be writing descriptive paragraphs of ourselves, just 4 to 5 sentences. I even wrote 4 here myself, very simple and straightforward, but you're welcome to add as much as you want. But this is a very basic, typical, you know, every single day, this is what I look like kind of situation here. So I'll read it out loud to you. And if you have any questions before we start the activity, we will get into that at the end of this. Okay. Bonjour, je m'appelle Madame Ejona. Je suis américaine et albanaise. Je suis très grande. Je suis plus grande que toute ma famille. J'ai les yeux bleus, les cheveux courts et blancs, et je porte des lunettes. I'll read that one more time, a little slower. Bonjour, je m'appelle Madame Ejona. Je suis américaine et albanaise. Je suis très grande. Je suis plus grande que toute ma famille. J'ai les yeux bleus, les cheveux courts et blonde, et je porte des lunettes. So what we see here, I said, hello, my name is Madame Ejona. I am American, and I'm Albanian, Albanese. I am very tall. So I'm not just tall, I'm very tall. And this next sentence is an important descriptor because even though I don't physically describe myself here, I make a comparison. I say I am taller than, remember plus means more, moi would mean less, and this is your than, the que, my entire family. So that proves that I'm saying I'm so tall, I'm very tall. I say here I have blue eyes. I say here I have short blonde hair. Obviously, it doesn't look like that on the camera right now. And I wear glasses because I wear glasses every single day. So I consider that a part of my descriptive characteristic. You know, no one would ever see me without glasses. So before we get into our activity, something to keep in mind throughout this whole lesson, you know, why is it important to use these descriptions properly? Well, first of all, like I've been saying, we use these descriptions in our everyday life. You're going to be describing what you look like. You're going to be describing your day. You're going to be describing to people your family, you know, who you've grown up with, who and what they look like. You're going to be describing the kind of clothes that you're wearing or the kind of food that you want to get, kind of groceries that you might need. There's so many ways in which you describe and use adjectives on an hourly basis, let alone by the end of the day. But in specific to French, descriptions and adjectives, as well as, you know, your verbs, your everyday component of the language is gendered. So it's important that we use the descriptions properly because it can affect the context of our sentence. We don't want to accidentally switch up gender. We don't want to switch up meaning. We don't want to say that there's multiple of something when we mean the singular of something. If you're describing me, Ms.Ejona, you don't want to be giving characteristics that might describe me in a masculine sense or in a plural sense, if that is not what I subscribe to. So it's really important that we internalize these differences and we internalize the structure of adjectives and how they change in order to really strengthen what we are describing. All right, so do we have any questions before I begin the next activity? Great. And that is the end of my lesson plan demo. Thank you so much.